My ex left me because I was just a construction worker. Now she begs come back. You ever have one of those moments where you're sitting in your beat-up truck, scrolling through Instagram like an idiot, and suddenly realize your entire life is a joke? That was me Friday night, 3 weeks ago. Cleveland was doing its usual November thing, cold, wet, and about as welcoming as a tax audit. My name's Daniel Carter, 32 years old, construction worker, and apparently, according to my ex, not good enough. See, I'm the guy who actually knows what it feels like to build something from nothing, not with spreadsheets or PowerPoints or whatever those office folks do all day. I mean real building, where sawdust gets in your coffee, where a mistake means tearing down a wall, where at the end of the day you can actually touch what you created. My hands tell stories. Every callus, every scar, every permanently darkened fingernail has a house, a deck, a kitchen behind it. But Rachel couldn't see that. Rachel saw dirt under my fingernails where other guys had manicures. She saw work boots where other guys had Italian leather. 3 years we were together. 3 years of me thinking we were building something together. Turns out I was the only one holding the hammer. The breakup itself wasn't even dramatic. No thrown dishes, no screaming match. Just her, standing in my apartment. The one I'd renovated myself, by the way, looking at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. She said those words that still wake me up at 3 a.m. sometimes. She looked at my hands, these hands that had built her custom shells, fixed her car, held her when her dad died, and she said them like she was reading a grocery list. Cold, matter of fact, done. She wanted a man who built businesses, not walls. Funny thing is, I thought walls were pretty important. They keep the rain out. They hold up the roof. They give you something solid when everything else is falling apart. But what do I know? I'm just a guy with a toolbox and a mortgage. So there I was 3 years later, sitting in my 2004 F-150 with 267,000 miles on it. Yeah, I know the exact number because I do my own maintenance. Another thing Rachel found embarrassing, scrolling through social media like some kind of masochist. You know how the algorithm works, right? It's like it knows exactly what'll hurt you most and serves it up with a smile. There she was, the Marble Room. Man, the Marble Room. If you're not from Cleveland, let me paint you a picture. This place is where lawyers take their mistresses, where trust fund kids celebrate graduations, where normal people like me drive past and wonder what the bread costs. I'd promised to take her there once, save for 3 months. Then my truck's transmission went out, and that was that. She said she understood. Guess she didn't. The photo showed her in this black dress I'd never seen. Probably cost more than I make in a week. Next to her, some guy in a suit that actually fit him. Not like my one funeral and wedding suit that makes me look like a kid playing dress up. His watch alone probably cost more than my truck. The caption underneath. God, the caption was what really got me. She knew I'd see it. She had to know. My first instinct was to throw my phone out the window, let it shatter on East 9th Street. Maybe take out a pigeon or two. But phones are expensive, and I'm practical even when I'm pathetic. Instead, I just sat there, engine running, heat barely working, watching my breath fog up the windshield. That's when I looked at my hands. Really looked at them, you know? Not just a glance, but studied them like they were some kind of map. They were rough, yeah, cracked knuckles from winter work. A thumbnail that never grew back right after a hammer mishap. Permanent calluses that no amount of lotion could soften. These weren't Instagram hands. These weren't hands that signed deals or moved money around on computers. These were hands that built things. My grandpa's voice came back to me then. Grandpa Joe was old school Polish. Came here with nothing but a suitcase and an attitude. Worked steel mills until his back gave out, then taught me everything about working with my hands. I was maybe 15, complaining about some girl at school who said I smelled like sawdust. He grabbed my hands, turned them over like he was reading my palm, and said something I'll never forget. He told me these hands could do 3 things that mattered: feed a family, build a home, and defend what's mine. Everything else was just noise. At 15, I thought he was just another old man talking nonsense. At 32, sitting in that cold truck, I finally got it. The anger started in my chest. Not hot anger, cold, like liquid nitrogen, spreading through my veins. Rachel thought I was nothing because I worked with my hands, because I came home dirty, because I drove a truck older than her newest purse. The photo stared back at me from my phone screen. Her smile, that perfectly practiced, yoga class and juice cleanse smile. I turned off my phone, sat in the darkness for a while, just me and the sound of my ancient heater trying its best. Cleveland's skyline blinked back at me through the foggy windshield. All those buildings, somebody built those. Somebody like me, with hands like mine. 3 years I've been feeling sorry for myself. 3 years of wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done different. 3 years of thinking maybe she was right, maybe I was just a guy with a hammer and a high school diploma, nothing special. 3 years of existing instead of living. My phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer it. Unknown number. Probably some robot trying to sell me extended warranty for my truck. Yeah, good luck with that. Robots. But something made me pick up. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just boredom. Either way, that phone call changed everything. It was a lawyer, not the ambulance-chasing kind you see on bus stops, but a real one, with an office downtown and everything. My Aunt Linda had passed away. Now, Aunt Linda was special. Never married, no kids, lived alone in this tiny house in Lakewood with about 17 cats and a collection of romance novels that would make a librarian blush. We weren't close, exactly. She'd show up to family things, drink too much wine, tell inappropriate stories about her youth, slip me $20, and disappear for another year. But she always remembered my birthday. Always sent a card with a crisp $50 bill and the same message. Build something good this year, Danny. The lawyer, Thompson, his name sounded tired. Probably had to deal with a lot of dead people's messes. He explained that Aunt Linda had left me something in her will. Not the cats. Thank God. Money. Actual money. $12,000. I nearly dropped the phone. $12,000. To most people, that's not life-changing money. That's not quit your job money or buy a yacht money. But to me, sitting in that truck with $247 in my checking account and a credit card I was afraid to use, $12,000 might as well have been $12 million. Thompson said there was also a letter. Could I come by his office Monday to sign papers and pick everything up? I told him yes. Try to sound calm and professional like I dealt with lawyers and inheritances all the time. Then I hung up and just sat there staring at nothing. Aunt Linda, crazy cat lady Aunt Linda, who wore too much perfume and told dirty jokes at Thanksgiving. She left me $12,000. Why? I wasn't her favorite nephew. That was my cousin Michael who went to law school. I wasn't a successful one. That was my brother Tom with his dental practice. I was just Danny, the guy who fixed her porch that one time and never charged her for it. The weekend crawled by like it was getting paid by the hour. I didn't tell anyone about the money. Didn't even tell my buddy Jake, who I usually tell everything. This felt too fragile. Like if I said out loud it might disappear. I went to work Saturday, emergency job fixing some rich couple's bathroom leak. They complained the whole time about having to be home on a weekend while I worked. Lady actually asked if I could work quieter. Sure, lady, let me just whisper this pipe into place. Sunday I went to church. Don't laugh. I'm not really religious, but sometimes you need to sit somewhere quiet and think. Plus they have free coffee, and when you're counting every dollar, free is free. I sat in the back row, watched families file in, all dressed up and proper. Thought about Aunt Linda. Wondered if she ever came here. Probably not. She always said organized religion was for people who couldn't think for themselves. But she believed in something. Had to leave money to her screw-up nephew. Monday morning came like Christmas and a root canal combined. Thompson's office was in one of those old buildings downtown that smells like leather and disappointment. His secretary looked at me like I was there to fix something. When I said I had an appointment, she actually double-checked her computer, like maybe I was confused about why a construction worker would be in a law office. Thompson himself was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of tired eyes you get from dealing with other people's problems all day. He had everything ready, papers to sign, explanations I didn't really understand about taxes and probate, whatever that means. Then he handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $12,000. Seeing it in writing, all those zeros, made it real in a way the phone call hadn't. There was another envelope, smaller, with my name written on it in Aunt Linda's shaky handwriting. The letter inside was short. One line. That was it. But that one line hit me harder than any long speech could have. She'd written it in her purple pen. She always used purple. Said black was for people with no imagination. The words were simple, but they weren't really about the words, you know? It was about her believing something about me that I'd stopped believing myself. It was about seeing potential where everyone else, including me, saw failure. I sat in Thompson's office, holding that check and that letter, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than numb. Not happiness exactly. It was too soon for that. Not excitement. I was too scared to be excited. It was possibility. Like when you're looking at an empty lot, and you can see the house that could be there, the foundation that could hold something amazing. Thompson asked if I was all right. Guess I'd been sitting there staring at those pieces of paper for a while. I told him, yeah, I was good. Thanked him, shook his hand. Noticed his hands were soft, probably never held anything heavier than a briefcase, and walked out. Back in my truck, I read Aunt Linda's words again. Build something great, Danny. Start with a foundation. Foundation. Construction term. The base everything else rests on. If your foundation's crap, doesn't matter how pretty the house is. It's coming down eventually. But get the foundation right, make it solid, make it true, and you can build anything on top of it. I looked out at Cleveland through my cracked windshield. Same city that looked so cold Friday night. Same buildings, same streets, same gray November sky. But something was different. The city hadn't changed. I had, or maybe I was about to, $12,000. Not enough to retire on. Not enough to impress anyone. But maybe, just maybe, enough to build something. To start something. To prove that these hands, these dirty, callous, working hands, could create more than just walls and floors. They could create a future. I held that check like it was made of spider silk, afraid it might dissolve if I breathed wrong. This wasn't just money. This was Aunt Linda's faith in me, printed on bank paper. This was her saying what no one else would, that I was worth betting on, that I could build something great. The sun was setting by the time I stopped staring at that check. Cleveland does this thing in November where the sunset hits the lake just right and for about 5 minutes. The whole city turns gold, like God's giving you a preview of what it could be if you just hung in there through the gray. I folded the letter carefully, put it in my wallet behind my driver's license. The check went into my jacket pocket, close to my chest. Tomorrow I'd deposit it. Tomorrow I'd start thinking about what to do with it. Tomorrow I'd begin whatever came next. But that night, sitting in my truck in the law office parking lot, watching Cleveland turn gold for those 5 minutes, I didn't think about tomorrow. I thought about Aunt Linda, probably laughing somewhere at giving her screw-up nephew one last chance. I thought about my grandpa and his work-worn hands. I thought about foundations and what you could build if you just had something solid to start with. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like someone standing at the beginning of something. I didn't know it yet. Didn't have a plan or a blueprint or any clear idea beyond that check in my pocket and that one-line letter in my wallet. But I had something I hadn't had Friday night when I saw that Instagram post. I had hope. Not the fake kind you tell yourself when you're trying to get through another day. Real hope. The kind that sits in your chest like a warm coal, ready to catch fire if you just give enough air. I started my truck, that ancient F-150 that Rachel hated so much. It coughed twice before catching, like always. The heat still barely worked. The passenger door still didn't lock right. But it was mine, paid for, reliable in its own stubborn way. Like me, I guess. As I drove home, I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't need the noise. Just drove through Cleveland in silence, $12,000 in my pocket, 5 words from a dead ant in my wallet, and for the first time in years, the absolute certainty that something was about to change. I didn't know I was about to buy a house that would make a condemned building look good. Didn't know about the business that would come later, or any of what was waiting for me. All I knew was that I had a foundation to build on now. $12,000 and the memory of an aunt who wore too much purple and believed in her nephew when no one else did. The check felt warm against my chest as I drove. Or maybe that was just hope burning its way through 3 years of feeling sorry for myself. Either way, I was ready to build something. Ready to prove that these hands could do more than just swing a hammer. Ready to show everyone. Hell, ready to show myself what Daniel Carter could actually do when someone believed in him, even if that someone was gone. Even if all I had left of her was $12,000 and 5 words in purple ink, it was enough. It was a foundation. And like any good builder will tell you, everything starts with a solid foundation. That $12,000 burned a hole in my bank account for exactly 3 days. 3 days of me staring at the balance on my phone app like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. 3 days of researching, planning, and drinking way too much gas station coffee. Then I found it, the house that would either make me or destroy me completely. It wasn't on Zillow or Realtor.com or any of those fancy sites where normal people shop for homes. No, this beauty was buried in the city's tax foreclosure list, the kind of document you have to know exists before you can even find it. Page 47. Third entry from the bottom. Address: 4847 Detroit Avenue. Status: available for immediate sale. Price: $10,000. 10 grand for a house. In Cleveland, sure, but still, that's less than most people pay for a used car. Hell, that's less than some people pay for a wedding dress they'll wear once. There had to be a catch. There's always a catch. I drove out there on a Thursday morning, skipped work, told my boss I had a stomach bug. He didn't care. As long as I showed up Monday ready to hang drywall, we were good. The drive took me through neighborhoods that got progressively worse, like watching a time-lapse video of urban decay. Nice houses became okay, houses became abandoned, houses became empty lots where houses used to be. Then I saw it. 4847 Detroit Avenue. Jesus Christ. You know how in horror movies there's always that one house that practically has a neon sign saying bad things happened here? This was that house. 2 stories of pure neglect. Windows boarded up with plywood that had started rotting. Front porch sagging like it was exhausted from holding up the house. Paint that might have been white once upon a time, now the color of old bones. The yard was a jungle, not in a lush green way, but in a things are living here that shouldn't be way. I sat in my truck for a full minute, engine running, finger hovering over the gear shift. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to drive away. This wasn't a fixer-upper. This was a tear it down and start over. This was what contractors called a money pit, what real estate agents called a lost cause, what normal people call condemned. But here's the thing about growing up in construction. You learn to see past the surface, like X-ray vision, but for buildings. So I got out of my truck, grabbed my flashlight and my crowbar. Yes, I keep a crowbar in my truck. Doesn't everyone? And went to meet my future disaster. The front door was locked, which was hilarious. Like anyone was going to break into this place to steal, what, the vintage Mo collection? I went around back. The back door wasn't just unlocked. It was barely attached. One good push and I was in. The smell hit me first. You know, that combination of wet dog, old newspaper, and something dyed in the walls? That. The kitchen looked like someone had started a renovation in 1987 and just gave up halfway through. Cabinets hung at weird angles. The floor had more layers than an onion. I counted at least 4 different types of linoleum, each uglier than the last. But then I looked up, and that's when I saw her bones. The ceiling had partially collapsed in the kitchen, which sounds bad, and but it let me see straight through to the structure. Original hardwood beams. Not pine, not some cheap composite. Oak. Solid oak beams from back when they built houses to last centuries, not decades. They were water-stained and needed work, but they were solid. You can't buy beams like that anymore. You literally cannot find one that old and that strong at any price. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight function, and really started exploring. The foundation, poured concrete, no major cracks. That's a $20,000 job right there if it had been bad. The load-bearing walls, all intact, all straight. The house had good bones, as we say in the trade. Like finding a classic car under a tarp in some old lady's garage. Sure, it looks like crap, but underneath, the upstairs was worse and better at the same time. Worse because there were definitely things living up there. I could hear them scurrying when I walked. Better because the roof damage was mostly confined to one corner. The rest was just ugly, not structurally compromised. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. About 1,400 square feet total. In a different neighborhood. Fixed up, this would be a $150,000 house easy. I spent 3 hours in that house. Checked every joist, every support beam, every foundation wall. Took about 200 photos. Made notes on my phone until my battery almost died. By the time I left, I was covered in dust, cobwebs, and probably diseases that hadn't been discovered yet. But I was also excited. First time in 3 years, I felt that flutter in my chest that wasn't anxiety or heartburn. The city clerk's office was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick, that distinct government building smell of old coffee and despair, and a line that moved about as fast as evolution. When I finally got to the window, the clerk looked at me like I'd asked to buy the moon. She actually asked me to repeat the address. Then she asked if I was sure. Then she asked if I understood what as is meant. Lady, I want to tell her, I've been as is my whole life. I know exactly what it means. Instead, I just said yes, filled out approximately 7,000 forms, and wrote a check for $10,000. She processed it all with the enthusiasm of someone filing their own death certificate. Then she handed me a folder with all the paperwork and said the words that changed everything. Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You're now the owner of 4847 Detroit Avenue. Good luck. Good luck. Like I was going to war. Which, looking back, wasn't that far off. I had $2,000 left. $2,000 to turn a haunted house into something livable. Most people spend that on a bathroom renovation. I had to stretch it across an entire house. But here's where growing up poor and working construction gives you superpowers. You know where to find stuff. You know who to talk to. You know how to make a dollar scream for mercy. First thing, the roof. If you don't fix the roof, nothing else matters. Water is the enemy of everything in a house. It rots wood, grows mold, destroys insulation, and basically undoes any work you put in. But a full roof replacement? That's $10,000 minimum. So I got creative. There's this thing called construction salvage. When rich people renovate their houses, they throw away perfectly good materials because they want new stuff. Their trash, my treasure. I found a guy on Craigslist who was tearing down a garage. The shingles were only 5 years old, still had 20 years of life in them. He wanted someone to haul them away. Free shingles, just had to remove them myself. Spent a whole Saturday pulling shingles off his garage, carefully, so I could reuse them. My back screamed, my hands bled, but I had roofing materials. The plywood underneath the shingles in my corner, that was trickier. But I knew a guy who had leftover materials from a job site. Traded him 2 days of labor for enough plywood to patch the hole. Tar paper I actually had to buy, but that was only $100. I moved into the house the day I started working on it. Couldn't afford rent and renovation. Plus, being on site meant I could work whenever. 2 a.m. and can't sleep? Might as well patch drywall. The first month, I lived in the one room that didn't have holes in the walls. A bedroom upstairs. Had my sleeping bag, a camp stove, a cooler, and a battery-powered lantern. Like urban camping, except with more rats. Oh, yeah, the rats. And the raccoons. And something in the attic that sounded bigger than both. The raccoons were actually living in the basement like they'd signed a lease. First time I went down there with my flashlight, I counted 6 pairs of eyes staring back at me. We had a standoff. They won. I decided the basement could wait. My dad came by exactly once. walked through the front door, looked around for maybe 30 seconds, and said those encouraging words every son wants to hear from his father. Then he asked if I'd lost my mind. When I told him my plan, he laughed, actually laughed. Not a chuckle, not a snort, but a full belly laugh. Then he left. Thanks for support, Dad. My buddies were slightly better. Jake brought beer and helped me demo the kitchen one weekend. Tommy helped with the electrical in exchange for me helping him move his ex-girlfriend's stuff out of his apartment. Mike just brought more beer and moral support, which honestly was just as valuable. Every day was a battle. I'd fix one thing, and two more would break. Patch the roof, pipe burst in the bathroom. Fix the pipe, discovered termite damage in the floor. Treated the termites, found knob-in tube wiring that should have been replaced when Kennedy was president. Each problem ate into my $2,000, then my savings, then my credit card that I swore I'd never use. But slowly, painfully, the house started to transform, not into something beautiful. I didn't have that kind of money, but into something functional, something that wouldn't kill you if you lived in it. The bar was low, but I was clearing it. The worst night was in January. The furnace, which had been limping along on prayers and duct tape, finally died. It was 12 degrees outside. Inside wasn't much warmer. I couldn't afford a new furnace. That's $3,000 minimum. Couldn't even afford a space heater. The electrical system couldn't handle it without tripping breakers. So I did what any rational person would do. I built a fire in the fireplace that I hadn't even checked was safe to use, wrapped myself in every piece of clothing I owned, and spent the night feeding that fire like my life depended on it, which it kind of did. Woke up every hour to add what I'd salvaged from demolished houses. By morning, I was alive but questioning every decision that led me to this moment. The breakthrough came in March. A contractor I'd worked with before, Stan, stopped by to laugh at my misfortune. He walked through the house, shaking his head the whole time. But then he said something that changed the game. He needed someone to help with a big electrical job, a week of work, and his usual guy was out with back injury. Would I help him in exchange for him doing my plumbing? Would I? I would have traded my kidney for working plumbing at that point. That week nearly killed me. Working Stan's job during the day, working on my house at night. But by the end of it, I had a functioning bathroom. First time I flushed that toilet, and it actually worked. I might have cried a little. Don't judge. Word got around the contractor network. The crazy guy living in the death trap on Detroit Avenue, but also the guy who would trade labor for materials or expertise. I became part of the underground economy of construction workers. I'd frame a garage for someone. They'd help me with insulation. I'd do a demo job, keep the salvageable materials. It was like bartering in the apocalypse, except the apocalypse was just my life. Spring came like a miracle. The house that had tried to kill me all winter started to show signs of life. Natural light came through windows I'd replaced with salvage ones from a renovation across town. The floors I'd sanded by hand, couldn't afford to rent the machine, started to show their original beauty. That oak structure I'd seen on day one began to shine through the disaster. By summer, the house was almost livable by normal human standards. Not HGTV standards, not even bring your mother over standards, but won't die from toxic mold standards. The raccoons have been evicted, though I'm pretty sure they left bad Yelp reviews. The roof no longer leaked. The electrical wouldn't burn the place down. The plumbing worked more often than not. That's when I met Mrs. Chun. She was walking by while I was fixing the front porch, told me she'd lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, watched the house slowly die. She said something that stuck with me. She said houses are like people. They need someone to believe in them. Otherwise, they just give up. I started to see the neighborhood differently. Yeah, it was rough, but there were families here, people trying to make it work. Kids playing basketball on hoops made from milk crates. Old guys sitting on porches, watching the world go by. There was community here under the surface. Like my house, the neighborhood had good bones, just needed someone to see it. By fall, something incredible happened. I was almost done. The house wasn't fancy, wasn't magazine worthy, but it was solid, clean, functional. I'd spent every cent of that $12,000, plus another $8,000 in credit card debt I'd probably be paying off until I died. But I'd done it. I'd taken a condemned house and made it livable. That's when Tom from across the street knocked on my door. He'd been watching the transformation for months. His nephew was getting married, needed a starter home, had been approved for an FHA loan up to $70,000. Was I interested in selling? $70,000. For a house I bought for $10,000 and put $20,000 into, that's $40,000 profit. 4 years of my salary in 1 year of blood, sweat, and raccoon fights. I said I'd think about it, but I already knew my answer. This house had been my teacher, my torture chamber, my salvation, but it was time to let it go. Time to let Tom's nephew start his own story here. The closing was quick. Cash deals always are. The day I handed over the keys, I walked through one last time, touched those oak beams that had started it all, said goodbye to the room where I'd almost frozen to death, thanked the house for not killing me. The check cleared the next day. $40,000 profit. After paying off the credit cards, I had $42,000 in the bank. From $12,000 to $42,000 in 1 year. Not bad for a guy with cement under his fingernails. I celebrated exactly how you'd expect a construction worker to celebrate. Went to the fanciest steakhouse in Cleveland. Not the Marble Room. Somewhere better. Somewhere that didn't have memories attached. Ordered the biggest ribeye they had. The one that cost more than I used to spend on food in a week. Asked for it to go. Drove to an empty lot where a house used to stand. One I'd looked at before buying mine. Sat in my truck. Same beat-up F-150 that had carried every piece of salvage material, every bucket of paint, every bag of concrete. Put that expensive steak on my dashboard. Cut it with my pocket knife. And ate it with my fingers like a caveman who just discovered fire. It tasted like victory. Like validation. Like proof that these hands could build more than just walls. They could build wealth. Not Wall Street wealth, not tech bro wealth, but real wealth. The kind you create with sweat and stubbornness. Sitting there in my truck, expensive steak juice dripping on my work pants, I laughed. Not the bitter laugh of someone who's given up, but the real laugh of someone who's figured something out. I'd taken the worst house in Cleveland and made it worth something. If I could do that, what else was possible? The sun was setting, painting the empty lot golden. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a siren wailed, Cleveland doing its Cleveland thing. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not just surviving, but building, creating value where everyone else saw trash. $42,000 in the bank. No more credit card debt. I hadn't just fixed a house. I'd proven something, not to the banks or my dad or even to Rachel. To myself, those hands, she said, would always be covered in cement. They just built a future. I finished that steak as the last light faded from the sky. Tomorrow I'd start looking for the next project. Tonight, I was just going to sit here in my truck, full of expensive meat, and earn pride, knowing that I finally found my thing. Not building houses for other people. Building wealth for myself, one abandoned property at a time. And I was just getting started. $42,000 sounds like a lot until you try to scale a business with it. That's what I learned real quick after my first flip. You can't just keep buying $10,000 disasters forever. You need to think bigger. Problem is, thinking bigger requires money I didn't have. Yet, the bank didn't care that I just made 40 grand profit. They saw a construction worker with one lucky flip and a credit score that looked like a bad bowling score. But here's where being in construction pays off in ways Rachel never understood. You know people, and people know people. And sometimes those people need exactly what you're offering. Jake and Tommy, my buddies from way back, had been watching my Detroit Avenue adventure from the sidelines. Jake was an electrician, been doing it for 12 years, steady hands and a brain for systems. Tommy did HVAC, could make any heating system purr like a cat, even the ancient ones nobody else would touch. Both of them were tired of working for other people's dreams. We met at this dive bar on West 25th, the kind where the beer is cheap and nobody judges your work boots. I laid it out simple. I had $42,000 for down payments and materials. They had skills I needed. We'd split profits 3 ways after expenses. Not salaries, profits. We all had skin in the game. Jake looked at Tommy. Tommy looked at his beer. Then they both looked at me and said the 2 most beautiful words in business. We're in. Carter Construction and Renovation was born on a bar napkin. Real professional, right? But that napkin became our constitution. We each had our lanes. I handled acquisition, permits, and general contracting. Jake did all electrical and helped with structural. Tommy managed HVAC and plumbing. Together, we were like a discount Avengers if the Avengers fixed houses and drove trucks older than most college students. Our first 2 projects were conservative. Safe bets, a foreclosure in Ohio City that needed mostly cosmetic work. Bought for $35,000 with 20% down. Sold 3 months later for $65,000. A fire-damaged duplex in Tremont that looked worse than it was. $45,000 purchase, $20,000 in repairs. Sold for $95,000 to a property management company. We were rolling. 6 months in, we'd turned my $42,000 into $120,000 in combined assets. Not each, total. Split 3 ways. We weren't rich, but we were building something. Building momentum. Then came the Victorian on Franklin Boulevard. You know how every business has that one project that either makes you or breaks you. This was ours. 3-story Victorian, built in 1892, sitting on the historical register, which meant everything had to be done exactly right, or the city would crawl up our collective rear ends with microscope. The previous owner had started converting it to apartments, then ran out of money, then apparently ran out of town. We got it for $70,000, which was a steal, if you ignore the fact that it needed probably $100,000 in work to be habitable. Jake called it ambitious. Tommy called it insane. I called it an opportunity. 2 weeks into the project, we hit our first wall, literally and figuratively. The city's historical preservation office showed up and shut us down. Apparently, we couldn't just fix things. We had to restore them, using period-appropriate materials, with approved contractors, following a plan created by a certified historical restoration specialist. I stood there in my work boots and 3 days stubble while this city inspector, in a suit that probably cost more than my truck, explained how we were destroying Cleveland's architectural heritage. Behind him, I could see a house that had been falling apart for 5 years. But sure, we were the problem. That's when someone suggested Chloe Martinez. She was what I expected. I'd pictured some uptight academic type with glasses and a superiority complex. What I got was a 5'2" hurricane of opinions in paint-splattered jeans and combat boots, carrying a coffee that could wake the dead, and a portfolio that weighed more than she did. Our first meeting was a disaster. I showed her our plans. She laughed, actually laughed. Then she told me everything wrong with them, which took about 20 minutes and included phrases like architectural travesty and violence against Victorian sensibilities. She said I was a builder who only saw walls, while she was a designer who saw the soul of the house. I told her souls don't pay mortgages. She told me mortgages don't matter if the city condemns your work. We argued for an hour. Jake and Tommy just watched like it was cable TV. But here's the thing. She was right. And I knew it. And she knew I knew it. So when she finished destroying every idea I had, I asked her one question. Can you fix it? She could, but it would cost us 20% of profits. Not a flat fee, a percentage. She wanted skin in the game, too. Said she was tired of fixing other people's mistakes for hourly wages while they made the real money. Tommy thought I'd lost it. Jake just shrugged. He'd learned to trust my crazy. But watching Chloe work was like watching someone conduct a symphony where the instruments were wood and stone and glass. She didn't just know history. She understood why things were built certain ways, what made them beautiful, what made them last. She found suppliers I didn't know existed, salvage yards that specialized in period fixtures, a guy in Lakewood who could recreate Victorian trim work, a woman in Shaker Heights who restored stained glass windows. Our costs went up, but so did our potential sale price. By a lot. Working with her was frustrating and fascinating in equal measure. We'd argue about everything. She wanted authentic brass fixtures. I wanted functional plumbing. She wanted to preserve original plaster. I wanted walls that wouldn't crumble. Every decision was a negotiation, a battle, a compromise. But something else was happening too. Those arguments over coffee at 6 a.m. on the job site. Those late nights going over budgets. Her teaching me about architectural periods. Me teaching her about structural requirements. Those moments when we'd step back and look at what we were creating together. And for just a second, we'd both shut up and appreciate it. The Victorian took 6 months. 6 months of 16-hour days, of permit battles, of cost overruns that ate into our reserves. Jake threatened to quit twice. Tommy actually did quit once, for about 3 hours, until his wife told him to get back to work. But Chloe never wavered. She had vision, and she made us see it too. When we listed it, the asking price was $450,000. The real estate agent thought we were dreaming. The market for historical properties in Cleveland wasn't exactly hot. But Chloe had documented everything. Every restoration, every preserved detail, every story the house could tell. She turned our listing into a love letter to Cleveland's past. It sold in 3 weeks. Full asking price. Cash buyer from California who wanted a piece of authentic Midwest history. After all expenses, permits, and Chloe's percentage, we netted $200,000. Split 3 ways. That was more money than any of us had ever seen at once. We celebrated at that same dive bar where it all started. Jake bought rounds. Tommy made a toast about being too stubborn to fail. Chloe showed up in a dress. First time I'd seen her in anything but work clothes. And for a moment I forgot how to speak. She sat next to me, closer than necessary, and said something that changed everything. We make a good team, Daniel. Maybe we should make it permanent. She meant business permanent. Of course she did. We formed CCD Restoration. Carter, Chloe, and crew. She became our secret weapon. We'd buy properties others overlooked because they were historical nightmares, and she turned them into gold mines. The old fire station in Detroit Shoreway, the abandoned church in Glenville, the former speakeasy in the flats that still had bullet holes from the 20s. But that library, man, that library was our moonshot. The Carnegie Library on Superior had been empty for 15 years. The city had tried everything. Community center, startup incubator, even considered tearing it down. But it was built like a fortress, would cost more to demolish than to ignore. So there it sat, 3 stories of limestone and broken dreams, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Our plan was insane. Convert it to luxury lofts. 12 units, each one unique, each one preserving different architectural elements. The reading room will become a 2-story penthouse. The children's section would be 3 starter units. The reference area would be split into 4 massive lofts with original oak shelving as design features. Every bank said no. Too risky, too expensive, too ambitious for a company that had been around less than 2 years. We pitched 17 banks. 17 rejections. I was ready to give up. Jake was already looking at other projects. Tommy just kept saying we were crazy to even try. But Chloe wouldn't let it go. She'd fallen in love with that building. She'd spend hours there, mapping every detail, imagining what it could be. She made me see it too, not just as a project, but as something that could matter, something that could last longer than we would. The 18th bank had a young loan officer named Marcus. Kid couldn't have been 30. Looked like he should be selling cell phones, not commercial loans. But when Chloe presented our plan, something in his eyes lit up. Turns out his dad had been a contractor, built half of the houses in Parma before the recession killed his business. Marcus understood what we were trying to do because he'd watched his father try and fail to do the same thing. He fought for us. 2 weeks of presentations to the loan committee. 2 weeks of him calling us with questions, concerns, requests for more documentation. 2 weeks of Chloe basically living at the library, creating the most detailed renovation plan any of us had ever seen. Marcus told us later he'd put his own job on the line, told his bosses if they didn't approve this loan. They were idiots who didn't understand Cleveland's future. We got the loan. $2 million. Just typing that number makes my hands shake even now. $2 million to four people who'd started with $42,000 and a prayer. The terms were brutal. Personal guarantees from all of us. 15% down. Completion in 18 months, or they could call the whole thing. But we had our shot. The library renovation was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every day brought new problems. Asbestos in places it shouldn't be. Foundation issues nobody had caught. The city changing requirements mid-project. We hired crews. 15 guys at the peak, burning through cash like it was kindling. Jake had his first kid during month 6. Tommy's marriage almost fell apart during month 10. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night for a year. But Chloe was there every day, making sure every detail was perfect, every corner was right. Every surface told the story it was supposed to tell. We pre-sold 6 units before completion. Word got out about what we were doing. The Plain Dealer did a feature story. Local news came by. Suddenly we weren't just contractors. We were urban renewal pioneers, or whatever buzzword they wanted to use. But it helped. By the time we finished, all 12 units were sold. Total sales, $4.8 million. Total costs, including the loan, $3.2 million. Net profit, $1.6 million. My share, after everyone got paid, $400,000. The day we closed the last sale, we met on the library's roof. It had been converted to a common area for the residents, with gardens and seating and a view of downtown that could stop your heart. Jake brought champagne, real champagne, not the gas station stuff. Tommy made another toast, this one about dreams and stubbornness and friends dumb enough to believe in each other. Chloe stood next to me, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, turning everything gold, and she was quiet for once. Then I did something I'd been planning for weeks. Pulled out a key, one of those old-fashioned brass ones she loved, and handed it to her. She looked confused until I pointed to the building across the street. That's your studio. I told her. Bought it last week. Cash. It's yours, not the company's. Yours. She looked at the key, then at me, then at the building. For the first time since I'd met her, she had no words. Just tears. Good tears. The kind you get when someone sees you, really sees you, and thinks you're worth investing in. Jake and Tommy made excuses to leave. Smart men. We stood there, just the two of us, on top of our empire. Not an empire of steel and glass like the big developers had. An empire of saved buildings, preserved history, renewed neighborhoods. An empire built with hands that knew work, minds that could see potential, and hearts too stubborn to quit. 5 years passed like that. 5 years of growing, building, succeeding in ways I'd never imagined. We went from flipping houses to developing entire blocks. From 3 people with a dream to a company with 40 employees. From my $42,000 to a business worth $8 million. Chloe and I, we became more than business partners. We became everything. She moved into my house. Not the disaster on Detroit Avenue, but a restored Victorian in Ohio City we'd kept for ourselves. We worked together all day, came home covered in dust and possibility, planned our next project over dinner. It wasn't the life Rachel had wanted. It was better. It was real. Then came the charity gala. The Cleveland Foundation was honoring local businesses that gave back to the community. We'd started a program training kids from rough neighborhoods in construction trades. Real skills, real jobs, real futures. Nothing fancy, just passing on what we knew to kids who needed a chance. The way I'd needed one. The gala was at a convention center. The fancy part with the lake view. Everyone in Cleveland money was there. Developers, bankers, politicians, all dressed like they were auditioning for a magazine cover. Chloe wore this green dress that made her look like she owned the world. I wore my only suit that actually fit, bought specifically for occasions when work boots weren't appropriate. We were standing by the bar, Chloe talking to some developer about preservation tax credits. When I saw her, Rachel, not as a guest. She was working the event, carrying a tray of champagne, wearing the catering company's uniform. She saw me at the exact moment she tripped. Time slowed down like in those action movies. The tray went up, the glasses went everywhere. Champagne creating modern art on expensive carpet. The sound, that crystal breaking on marble sound, stopped every conversation in the room. Everyone turned to look. I moved without thinking, walked over, got down on my knees next to her, started picking up the bigger pieces of glass. She was frozen, staring at me like I was a ghost. Maybe I was. The ghost of who she thought I'd always be. She started to speak, her voice shaky, mentioning she'd seen the article about our company in the business journal. I helped her to her feet, made sure she wasn't cut, then said the words I'd been unconsciously preparing for 5 years. I told her it was okay, that sometimes we need someone to tell us we're not enough, so we can finally prove to ourselves that we are. That I should thank her, really, for the push, for the motivation, for showing me what I didn't want my life to be. Her manager appeared, started apologizing to everyone, trying to shuffle Rachel away. I told him accidents happen, no harm done, probably even mentioned our company would cover any damages. Chloe appeared at my side, didn't say anything, just put her hand in mine. A quiet claim, a subtle statement. This is mine. We're us. Rachel looked at our joined hands, at Chloe's designer dress, at my expensive suit, at the logo for our company on the presentation screen behind us. She looked like someone trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. How did a guy with concrete under his fingernails end up here while she was carrying trays? But here's what I realized, standing there in that convention center, surrounded by Cleveland's elite, holding the hand of a woman who saw me as a partner, not a project. I felt nothing. No anger at Rachel. No satisfaction at the reversal. No need to twist the knife. Just nothing. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And I was completely, peacefully indifferent to the woman I'd once thought was my future. I told Rachel to take care of herself, really meant it, then walked away with Chloe. We went out to the terrace, looked at the city lights reflected in Lake Erie. Cleveland spread out before us. All those buildings, all those stories, all those possibilities. Chloe asked if I was okay. I was more than okay. I told her we had more plans to build, more buildings to save, more kids to train. She smiled, pulled me closer, and we stood there watching our city shine. Looking back, I understand now what Aunt Linda meant about foundations. She wasn't just talking about buildings. She was talking about life. You start with something solid, belief in yourself, people who matter, work that means something. You build on that, layer by layer, year by year. The best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's building a life so good, so full, so authentic to who you are, that what they think becomes completely irrelevant. It's not about showing them. It's about showing yourself. My hands still get dirty. Still have concrete under the nails sometimes. Still got calluses that won't quit. But now they also sign contracts, shake hands with mayors, and hold the woman who helped me build an empire from ruins. Rachel was right about one thing. I'd never be the man she wanted. Thank God for that, because I became something better. I became the man I wanted to be. And that man, he builds things. Real things. Things that matter. Things that last. Standing on that terrace with Chloe, looking at our city, our empire saved buildings and renewed dreams, I realized the truth. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is tell you what you can't be. Because that's when you finally discover what you can.